Hi there, everybody. Welcome to our panel. I am Genevieve Hartman, also known as Evie, and this is Olivia Montoya. Our panel is virtually there, taking your online role playing games to another level of avatar based proximity chat platforms. We're both very excited to be here. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself first. My name is Evie, and basically, the biggest thing about me is I am never ever bored. My experience up to now spans technology, small business, graphic design, experience design, and copywriting. I'm especially interested in the fields of virtual social presence apps, AR and XR technology, a little bit of clinical research here and there. I love it when overlap sometimes. I started out in the oil field doing oil field chemistry, cement chemistry, but I'm much happier where I'm now. Most recently, I was a technology team lead for a small game company, helping lead and help people that were much, much better at programming and all things smart on that front than me. Right now, I make environments for online proximity chat events, mainly on GatherTown. And I'm also working on some art and a coloring book for Thealana, an interactive theatrical experience that one of my friends from Magnetic Mapworks is making. I'm really, really happy to be here, and I'm excited to have Olivia introduce herself. I'm a big fan.
I'm Olivia Montoya. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm sort of a jack of all trades. I do stuff in the LARP and TTRPG communities. I dabble in video game stuff, and I love getting into the gray areas between those. I'm also big on zine culture, art, graphic design, and game jams. I love game jams, and um, like one of the most relevant projects I'm working on is a third-party web app that's supposed to be able to embed in some of the platforms that we're about to talk about to play LARPs with inventory systems and other cool features.
Well, I think we've got some questions we're going to start off with. Basically, how this is going to go is we want to make this as interactive as possible. A little bit later on in this panel, I'm going to be actually walking through some of the platforms that we're talking about. But first, we'll go ahead and start with the first question we have prepared. What are avatar-based proximity chat platforms? I think our individual definitions kind of cover different ground. So, Olivia, do you want to start with that?
Oh, yeah, sure. The definition I generally use is like they're basically these platforms that are sort of like when video games and video chat have a baby. that they have a spatial element, which like you could where are controlling an avatar, which is representing you, usually like looks like a person or maybe like a circle, and you can move it around the space, and depending on where you move to, you can talk to different people. It can be either like a gradient where the closer you get to somebody, the louder their voice becomes, or like their video fades in or out, depending on whether you're moving away, or it can be more discrete. Like if you're in a spot, you can hear the people in that space, and if you're not in that spot, you can't.
That pretty much covers it. I like to add that for platforms like this, even though the name doesn't sum it up, they're also customizable, user customizable. Like you can go in and make the experience that you want. And not every single online social platform is like this, but I think for our purposes and for the specific category of platforms I want to talk about today, that's definitely a thing. It needs to be user customizable if you're going to make any kind of gamified experience with it. But yeah, your definition exactly covered what it is. And I also like the ones that your grandmother could probably figure out how to use if needed, but that's not a necessary thing for, you know. All right, our next question. Who are these platforms for? I'll go ahead and take this one first. I think these platforms are for the same kind of person who brings in donuts on Fridays to work. They're for the kind of person who loves that extra delight, who loves real connection and values ways to enhance it whenever they can. And also people that, can't necessarily, more realistically, people that want to collaborate with other people, but can't because we're so far away either right now or because it's just a remote workplace or because they miss their family and it was the pandemic. Basically, people who want to be closer together and try to feel as present as possible.
And I'll add on to that. People who want to change how people communicate with each other. Like, how do we connect with each other through the internet? Like, we're so used to like interacting in certain ways that sometimes it can be difficult to try out something new. And I feel like the pandemic has forced us to try something new, and we're seeing new ways of connecting with each other that probably would have happened eventually, but um, uh, it's been accelerated by the fact that we have to isolate physically from each other. So I think that what we're seeing now with these proximity chat platforms, that 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 that's a sign that we are in the future right now, and that there are even cooler things coming.
I completely agree with you, Olivia. Um, our next question is, what can I do with these platforms that I can't with more traditional ways of running games? And that, oh man, that's a big one. Olivia, do you want to start?
So if you're if you're using like a traditional well, if you're running a game like at a table, um like especially if you're talking tabletop role playing games, uh you have to imagine things that are going on in your head, and I mean, that can be a positive thing for some people, but other people, like, they want something that they can feel like they're interacting with. And especially with like some of the VR platforms that we're going to talk about, like, that can give that sense. um and another thing that's possible, with some of these platforms, is like being able to send messages, with other players or other people using the platform. And like there can be different means of chatting, either like direct messages, area-based messages, uh, depending on your proximity to other people who are in the space, or even global chat.
I completely agree. I also want to add something actually that someone posted in the GatherTown server a little bit earlier that I really liked. I was, I had my own answers to this, but I like that she mentioned you don't have to transport decorations. You don't have to place them in a physical room. You don't have to worry about buying too many snacks and drinks. No hassles about getting there and back home. You can do whatever is in your imagination. You can run a game on an airship, and you don't have to know how to use Unity or something in order to make that. You can make a video game like experience. And like, this is probably my favorite part. You can make a video game like experience without knowing how to make a video game. And that, I think, is everything involved in that. Everything that is included in that is probably my favorite way, my favorite thing that you can do running games wise above real life.
Yeah, a lot of these platforms have map makers that, like, anyone can, like, click and drag things around, or like paint where the walls are, and like
Hmm.
instantly have this, like, something that looks a lot like a video game. And I feel like we're going to see a lot of creativity as these become more and more popular. But like, yes, that, that exactly that thing about like the uh bringing in all the supplies for an in-person game is like exhausting, and sometimes expensive if you need a bunch of props.
Yeah.
And like, part of what I want to do with these video platforms is I want to lower the barrier of entry for running interesting immersive games. Um, I want to make it possible for people to like take a template for a game, and like all you have to do is like know a little bit about it before running the game. Have you don't have to be a programmer.
Yeah. Let's see. What are the current limitations of this technology? Like, what are these platforms definitely not suited for? Well, I'll start with the. Well, actually, I started with the last question. If you want to answer this one first, please be my guest.
So it's not accessible for everybody. It's platform to platform, it varies, but some people just don't react well to it. And a lot of times, if people have only access to mobile platforms, they're not always as robust, um, or maybe non-existent at all, depending on the platform. Um, and I feel like we're also limited in terms of the state of VR technology. Like right now, VR makes a lot of people sick if they can afford it.
Yeah. That's super true. What I was going to say ties very much into that. A lot of the things that I see as problems and limitations are things that I have every faith that will be solved within our lifetimes. Whether it's a big heavy headset, whether it's difficult controls. Um, for now, I think a big limitation of the platforms that exist is often the amount of expressiveness. Somewhere in my links that I took that I took down for this this panel, can't talk. Um, there is a scientific paper that is about how it changes people's experience to have a more expressive versus less expressive avatar. And so far, a lot of the platforms that are both easy to use and versatile have kind of low expressiveness when it comes to their avatar. Um, and there are things like they're adding onto it bit by bit, but being able to like move your arms, being able to turn your head, there's nothing that can really quite replace that. And some platforms kind of have the avatar and the video separated. And so you're not sure where to look when someone's talking. But if you want to feel present in the space, you look at the avatar. But then on some platforms, like which avatar is talking, because sometimes you can't tell. So greater expressiveness is a short-term goal that I would really like more platforms to be able to meet, but some of them do it pretty well.
Yes, I've heard from a lot of people, like what their feelings about some of these platforms are, and one thing that comes up a lot is the fact that I can't tell where the voice is coming from, but I can see the characters moving around it breaks their brain a little bit, and it's
Yes.
just so, but I have seen some people who are working on changing that and having some sort of visual representation of where sound is coming from. I've heard of a company called High Fidelity that's working on that.
Yes. Oh man. High fidelity is great, and I can always tell so quickly if a platform uses it. It is so much better. I know peer-to-peer sound is often, I think, a lot cheaper. I honestly don't know quite the ins and outs of it. I do know it's cheaper, but there's nothing quite like that cocktail hour sound when you are close to a crowd and you can hear a lot of voices speaking. For smaller games, it's not a big deal. Because when you're playing a game, you're usually not in crowds of at a time bigger than about 4 or 5. Is like that's the metric that they discovered. Gathered did some research, but yeah, that cocktail hour noise is missing from a lot of platforms, and I really really want to see it in more because that just adds to the experience so much.
Yeah, something that can be a little bit difficult also is like if you're moving around in these spaces and you're on video, but you're just sort of walking through an empty space and it's just empty. And it's like it can make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, nervous, uh, and having background noises would change a lot of that. I haven't seen a lot of these platforms that have like location-based sound where if like you get closer, like you can hear the sort of background noise. Like I feel like that should be added to a lot of these platforms.
Yeah. You find that I've found that more and more people are adding more and more platforms, I should say, are adding them. Recently, I was in a gather space. I can't share because it hasn't been released to the public yet. They're using it for a contest, I think. But it's amazing, and he's using Gather's API to add music and some other cool functions too. But the music, oh my gosh, it was the first time that I had been in a gather space that actually had background music, and it felt like a video game. And I was just like, yes, yes, this is where I want things to go. Now, if Gather could add animations, that would be fantastic. Spatial Chat has animations.
Oh yeah, in spatial chat, like you can drop in videos into the space or GIFs. You can like drop a meme as you're like talking with other people, like to as a means of reacting. Like this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about we're changing how people communicate.
Yeah, communicating spatially. Sorry, my hand's still on fire. Yes. Um, I don't know if that's one of the ones that we're talking about today, but it's definitely one of the ones on my extremely long list of all of these platforms that I'm slowly deep diving into. Um, and I I'm definitely going to come back to that. But for now, what is the next question? Where were we? How do I choose a platform? What is each platform best suited for? Let's stick with how do I choose a platform. I think right now there's not a whole lot of like there's several lists that are available online, but nowhere quite yet where you can compare them side by side. Um, may or may not be working on something like that. I don't want to say too much about it yet, but I definitely am. Um, but when it comes to choosing a platform, there are several things that you want to take in mind. Um, Ease of use. Who is your audience? If it's older people, you probably don't want to use a 3D platform because moving around in 3D is much more complicated and much more suited to younger generations who know how to play 3D video games and whatnot. You don't want them to have to learn an entire new way of moving around a space. Um, is it VR? If you're making an experience for for people who haven't used VR before, you definitely don't want that. And also, if you're making an experience that you want to appeal to as many people as possible, you probably want to make it 2D, like accessible. I mean, accessible to as many people as possible. You probably want to make it, you know, 2D for now. Um, let's see. Those are two big concerns. And then as you get further into the nitty gritty, it starts, we can make all kinds of things on platforms like these. And so it comes down to what you're individually, like the individual things you're making. Are you making an escape room type of experience? Are you making something where mechanics are important? Um, what's the structure of your game? Do you need to be able to change the appearance of your character? That's a big one. Olivia, what do you think?
So some of the also like the things that are probably going to be deal breakers is pricing and how many users are supported. So these different platforms can vary wildly in like what the prices are and like how many users you could get at different tiers of payment, whether there's a free tier or not. Also whether an app is required or whether it runs on mobile, like that can affect your accessibility. And also in general, uh, you want to keep in mind, am I like what features do I need in terms of disability accessibility, for
Yeah,
example?
it's a good
Like
one.
there some platforms have more limitations in regards to certain abilities than others. And oh yes, we have a, a a Google sheet where we will share the link for you with you. It is bit.ly slash VMAP sheet. You can look at that right now, and we've compiled a few platforms and what their pricing is, the number of supported users, whether it requires an app, whether it runs on mobile, advantages and limitations, and accessibility considerations. And we're also adding links to sample spaces that you can explore.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be getting into a few of those spaces a little bit later. Um, let's see, the next question here. What skills do I need to make these spaces? That is a big one. Um, for some of these, uh, they've got preset spaces, but if you're making a customizable experience, you want to be able to customize those, right? So there's, let's see, I'll go ahead and start with Gather. Um, Gather has maps that are pixel art, tile based maps where it functions on a 32 by 32 grid. So you can design a space like that in Photoshop. The easiest thing to do if you want to be minimalistic about it is to just like draw out the space you have in mind and then upload it into Gather and see how it feels when your avatar moves around. That is the simplest, easiest possible way to get started. Just draw something, um, upload it, see how it looks. And then once you do that crucial step, you'll have so much other stuff figured out, like how much bigger you want to make it, design elements, how exactly the grid works. 'Cause if you've never done that before, it's a little bit abstract of a concept. But I was gonna, my hands on fire. I don't want to turn it off. My video might freeze again. So uh, yeah. Anyway, the tiled program, it's just called tiled, is a fantastic resource for that. Probably the one that is most often used. There are other programs, but that's the most popular one. Um, let's see.
Yeah, tile takes you gotta like read a tutorial or two to learn how to use it, but once you've got it down, it's like you can paint like a 2D map and you get to choose like what the tile size is and you can upload in tile sets. There's a lot of free tile sets out there, so you don't even
Yeah.
need to be able to draw. And in fact, as Gather has gotten more and more improvements, you can also just pick one of their templates and like add a bunch of pixel art images to it that they have in their collection,
Mhm.
and they have all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, they do. Free tile sets are excellent. And that's just for Gather. Um, with Spatial Chat, I think you have to talk to them get to get one uploaded. Um, they've got spaces that are there that are isometric, and if you want to make it look like that, you probably need 3D skills. But you can just again, you can just draw something in Photoshop. Topia, um, you can draw assets and upload them. Second Life and VR Chat, that you 3D skills. But there's a lot of platforms out there where just some 2D art skills, you'll be fine.
Yeah,
Um,
like Remo is like that. That you can just like upload a background and then like point out, okay, here's where the seats are.
oh, nice. Yeah, I don't know very much about Remo. That's one that I haven't really looked at too deeply, but that's good. I know it's very easy to use, but also very expensive.
Yes, it's pretty expensive. But I've had the opportunity. I've had the opportunity to. Hmm?
Huh? Did we miss
I
something? I don't know if they can hear us. It's okay.
uh,
Um, all right.
yeah. So
So
what was I can't even remember what I was saying now, but basically we heard a sound.
we heard a sound and now everything is screeched to a halt, and that's okay. That's just how it is. That's just how it be sometimes. Um, yeah, another skill that I would say is important to make those spaces is getting a sense of how much room you'll need, and getting a sense of what the people in that space are going to want to be doing. And that's a more complicated thought. Um, Basically, if you're making an experience for just a few people, you can make your spaces smaller. But if you're making a space that's going to be occupied by a lot of people, you need to make sure that people are going to be able to get their avatars by each other without, you know, all the spaces becoming super crowded. Sometimes people won't be able to get close enough to an element to be able to interact with it. You don't want that. Oh, which leads to the next question. What are some design concerns to keep in mind when creating your spaces? And that, I just answered that question.
So I have a few more things I can add to that.
Yes, please.
So you want to keep in mind first, like, okay, how am I going to be using this space? Um, uh, there's a lot of different things that you can do that are related to gaming or adjacent to gaming and are uh, useful to think about. So, are you going to be using the platform to run a game itself? Are the features of the space going to be essentially in part of the game's world? You can, and are you going to be adapting a game to work in that space or designing a game around that space? Because adapting existing games can be difficult, especially if it's meant to run in person. Like especially if you're running a LARP.
Yeah. Oh,
And do you want to use your this platform as sort of an add-on or augmentation to another game or another platform? So like I've heard of people running in-person games that have like some element of the game that's like in one of these platforms, like to perform a specific task that wouldn't be possible in real life. Um, I've or do you want to create a space that's like a hangout where you can play games, like sort of like a meta space, a meta,
yes. Yeah.
meta metaverse. um, uh, so I've heard of lots of gaming spaces that have like essentially a clubhouse where they can go in and like meet around different tables and play games with each other. Like I know that Session Zero Con had a gather space where the entire con ran, and Story Games Glendale, who I've gamed with a few times, they have a gather space that's like that. And or also you can create a post or in between games hangout for cons or like other events. Like I know that Extra Con, which is a an online LARP convention, had a Remo space that was just a hangout for people to talk in between games. And I'm organizing an online day of play for the Make a Scene Scenario Festival, and I'm creating a gather space that's for in between chatter and a party. And I know that the Animus LARPs by the Chaos League, which are entirely online LARPs, used Spatial Chat for a post game space. And I've also seen other people like who are embedding games like based on other websites or web apps into these proximity chat spaces, or like creating escape rooms even, which is a little less adjacent, but like also there's some overlap between the escape room space and like RPGs.
Hmm. Let's see. All right, our next question is, what are some supplementary tools that can further strengthen engagement? Oh man, there are there are so many. Um, oh my goodness. So the most recent okay. So something else that I personally look for when I'm looking for a platform to run an event on is the kind of embeddables that I want. Firstly, I like it when a proximity chat platform uh, has them available. Gather is probably my favorite one for this. You can embed games, you can embed whiteboards, you can make guest books, you can make puzzles with the most exciting add-on that I've seen so far. Uh, let's see what's called Genial.ly. Um, something that One thing that I really want for my games is an inventory system. And right now, unless you get kind of deep into NFTs, know how to use them and want to use them for your games, which I never will, I don't think. Um, the- yeah, basically, an inventory system that you can just design is essential. And that is something that Genial.ly can allow you to do. I wish I could show that space where the awesome creator of the space used it to great effect. I can't because it's not available for the public yet. But basically, you can, using what he made, you can go around and collect plants. You can use those plants in a puzzle later to make some kind of potion. That potion will give you this item that you can use to crack something open. And it's great. Like without that stuff, you can still do things like solve this puzzle to get this password. But man, having the ability to pick up inventory from the space is absolutely cool. And genial.ly is the one that would recommend for that right now.
And this is something that I'm working on personally as well for mainly for Gather, but like there are a lot of other platforms that allow you to embed web pages in them.
Yep.
And so I'm taking advantage of that to create a third-party web app that lets you build the spaces involved in a LARP in a builder as a GM, and then make sort of clone each game for a specific run of the game, and all of the items, any items in the game, any locations with uh, readable text or boxes or like other containers of items that people can interact with, those can just be embedded as specific locations. Um, and so essentially what you'd be able to do is if you are logged into my web app and um, signed up as that character, you have access to their inventory. You can go around the gather space where interactive web pages are embedded. So like say there's a box in a room and you go up to the box, it says press X to open the box. And then the web page specific to that box opens up and it says, do you want to search the box? And you click the button and an item pops out and then it goes right into your inventory, and then you and the next time someone searches the box, that item is no longer there. So I am deep in working on this because lots of people, especially LARP people who want to run LARPs in these spaces, um, are really feeling the limitations of not having an inventory system.
Thank you. I had to cough and then I forgot. Thank you. Yeah, Olivia, the first time I ever saw your work was when you were posting about that, and ever so just enthused and excited about the possibilities of that, and I just cannot wait. It's gonna be cool. Let's see. The next question. Oh yeah, and there's other tools too. There's plenty of those. We're
Oh,
gonna have a document where we post a lot of them, I think. Have we already shared those documents, by the way?
we shared one of the documents that has the details about some of the different platforms and considerations, but we have not shared the link list yet. So we have got a list that basically has links to a bunch of different platforms, articles, tools, and community spaces that all are like about this topic in some way. And that is at bit.ly/vmap links. And if you have anything that you want to add to the list, you can comment there and we will evaluate it and decide whether to add it to the permanent list. And feel free to share those links with anybody. Um, it, and just as a reminder, the Google Sheet with the information on it about the different platforms is bit.ly/vmap sheet.
I need to go ahead and add that Discord server too. Um,
Yes, that's another cool thing is that these platforms have a lot of communities based around them. Like Evie, you tell us a little bit about the Gather Enthusiasts Discord
oh
server.
yeah, I haven't even mentioned that. So last November, okay, I didn't even mention. Gosh, okay, I gotta rewind a little bit. Sorry. Okay, so I am a longtime Dystopia Rising player, a live action LARP that meets all across the U.S. Chapters in half the U.S. states, at least for a while before the pandemic. But yeah, every month was great, and then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, we had to take our entire live action experience and we had to translate to online. and it was pretty wild. Like I've written and run LARP content before, but I had like never been a tabletop GM before. And soon people were going to be paying me to do that specific thing for them. So obviously, I wanted to do learned every single tool I possibly could, and I still have this massive, massive document um, spanning every single tool I could possibly find, and somehow that was back in April, and Gather Town existed at that point, and I didn't know. Like things potentially could have been a lot different, and the game may have been we may have used it and I would have loved it. But by the time I found it, it was already November and they had their way of doing it and we couldn't really switch. But yeah, when I found it, it was the best ever because I had been dreaming about it, writing about what I wanted to exist for literally months and I couldn't find it. Um, yeah, marketing and getting it in front of people's eyes has is still an issue for these platforms. But anyway, um,
Oh, I just wanted
I,
to add, uh, like anytime I've introduced people to this type of platform, at least if they're a LARPer, they like their eyes get big. Like they're like, I see the potential for role playing in this space and
yeah,
like building sets essentially that like they don't have to spend any money on or any effort on besides like basically they don't have to buy materials to like make props. There's not like piles of paper everywhere. Like there's potential here. This is what the future is.
yeah. And so I first found Gather, I think, from that remote live action online games group. I don't even remember quite how I found it, but there was an event that was running on GatherTown, and I was like, what is this? And so I started asking questions about it. And I met with Nate Card, who runs Magnetic Mapworks. And he told me that, it's been amazing and they love theatrical types of events and stuff like that, gamified events. But sometimes it's hard to, get in contact with them because they're a really small company working like 26/7, 24/7, trying to get everything done that they need to do to make it a good, solid platform. And I was like, are there any communities, places where I can get user to user, peer to peer help? And there weren't. And so I made a Discord server. And since then, it's Gather's unofficial fan run Discord server is, I want to say it's about 1,300 members, increasing every day. And people have been able to share their work, find jobs, some with the actual company itself. And it's just been just a joy to see people be able to share and show off resources, get tips, get help from each other. So the community around platforms, uh, like it's irreplaceable. And the other, Topia's got a really good Discord server, and most of these platforms obviously have like Second Life and Altspace VR, I think. Second Life and VR Chat obviously have massive user communities. Um, but uh, but yeah, that's how I found these platforms originally, and just my love for them has never faded and only increased. The very last question before we launch into exploring some of these platforms visually is where do we think the state of the technology is going? Go.
So obviously, like not just through my own actions, I know that more people are interested in creating inventory systems.
Huh?
Hmm?
It's hard to hear you. If you said something about Second Life, I'm not sure.
Not
Anyway, what
sure.
were you
Okay,
saying?
anyway,
No worries.
no worries. Uh, yeah, so I think we're going to see more people create user created tools to interact with these different platforms. Uh, and then people are going to use those tools to lower the barrier to entry to doing cool things. So like I like to describe running immersive events in these spaces sort of like uh creating Frankenstein's monster, but like not in a bad way. It's like you're attaching all these moving parts and like creating something that like is an immersive experience. And I think that we'll also see, we were talking about, before the panel started, Evie, you should talk about, like, what you think you're seeing we're gonna see in the future of VR.
Oh my gosh, yes. So, I think this is going to happen in our lifetimes. Basically, uh, I've said before, what I want is not exactly a metaverse. I want a holodeck. I want not just VR to be a thing that we're able to easily and naturally, organically, not organically, but naturally, natural feeling. You know what I'm trying to say. Make experiences on. I want to be able to put on my lightweight XR glasses and have go to a simple space that's been turned into an amazing game space, like, and watch it come to life in front of my eyes. I want to be able to put on a virtual costume that I designed myself. I want to be able to actually sit in my mom's living room and make eye contact with my real eyes to her real eyes. And I think that's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen not only within our lifetimes, but probably within the next 15 years, I would say. I hope. I've got my fingers crossed because I really, really want to see it. I want to be in it. I want to be on the team that takes something like it and makes a LARP experience on it for the first time. When that happens, that's where I want to be.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
I also think that, we're the trajectory that we're going to see is similar to, and that we're already starting to see the signs of, is similar to the indie video game sphere, where as the tools are becoming more and more available, like people who don't even know how to program are making games and sharing them with other people and creating these underground scrappy communities to make friends and share tips, and that essentially we're bringing people together and allowing people to do things that they wouldn't be able to do on their own.
I very much agree.
Folks have
And
talked
I
a
think
lot about
that's
the.
probably the strongest. Hmm?
You folks have talked a lot about the software. What about the hardware limitations?
The
Uh,
hardware limitations. So basically, if you're going just off of mobile, it's a little bit more difficult right now. I'm going to start from simplest to most complicated. Um, Mobile only experiences are like there are some platforms out there where those do exist, but I've got a list of like 100 sites uh, that I could go deeply into, but the most usable platforms right now, you're going to need a computer. And oftentimes you're going to need the Chrome browser specifically. And obviously, for a lot of the 3D apps, you're going to need a VR headset, but there are apps where that's optional. I really appreciate it when an app like this that can be used in VR also has an option for you to not have to. And uh, I'm actually very close to a really long list that goes into that. Like these are VR apps. These are the apps. These are the ones that you need a computer for, or that you can use on your phone. These are the ones where you need a VR headset. These are the ones where you can use either one. I really like VR chat for that purpose because you can be in VR, but you also don't necessarily need it to get what I would consider to be the full experience. I think that's
yeah, uh,
I mean that's arguable. VR, I mean there's nothing like being in, but if you want to be able to look around a space and interact with people, like you can still do it without a VR headset. And I think for a while that's going to be a thing that needs to be taken in consideration because until VR headsets and such are actually ubiquitous, we're gonna need those platforms where you don't need that. Hate to say.
and
I
unfortunately,
can't wait for it either. Go
uh,
ahead. Sorry.
yeah, unfortunately, and another thing that is an issue for a lot of people is for platforms that use any sort of like streaming video. The video quality on a lot of these platforms is not really comparable to Zoom right now. Like they need, and are looking for people. There, a lot of these companies are looking for people to improve the video quality. Um, like I've occasionally will have video issues if there's like more than like say 4 people in one area at a time. That can be improved in the future.
Let's see. Were there any more questions in the Twitch stream that we haven't gotten to? I wanted to take a moment before I dive into popping into some of these platforms. We've only got 15 minutes left. That kind of flew. Wait, no. Is that right?
Yeah,
Do
15
I have that
minutes
right?
left.
Wow.
Huh.
That really flew. Well, in that case, I think I am going to go over and switch to my OBS virtual camera and pop into some of these platforms. Give me just a moment. On this virtual camera. Oh, that's disorienting. Let me make sure I think I am mirrored, and I want to make sure I'm not, because then everything will be backwards. Flip horizontal. Okay, let's see. Hopefully I'm good to go. All right, give me just one moment. Oh, now there's two of me. And there we go. Okay, so this is Gather Town, and it's probably my favorite proximity platform, the one that I personally find most flexible and usable. And let's see, yeah, I've already given my background as to how I found it and got into it. I'm going to show you some of the spaces that I like best, that I think best represent the amazing things that you can do on these platforms. And oh, can't go that way. This is the Multiverse Showroom. It was made by Dowd Alzair, and I think it is one of my favorites. And I'm just gonna skip that. Oh wait, this isn't the space I thought it was. Yeah, there's a bunch of spaces that show off the different styles that you can use Gather for. There's really honestly no limit. Like pixel art is what most people do, uh, but it's not mandatory. Um, you can upload both backgrounds and foregrounds. So if you want to do nice lighting effects, as I'll show you in some of these later spaces, you absolutely can. This space over here was made for Alamo Draft House. Uh, People who make these spaces often are contacted by big companies who actually pay pretty good money for artists to make a pixel art space, pixel art version of the space they're used to being in. Fairly simple space, and that's a video. If I were to press X, it would pop up with, uh, yeah, I think this is a. Oh yeah, it's a Christmas themed one. This was a Christmas space. Anyway, let me go ahead and figure out the space that I actually wanted to show y'all. Oh, how do I get out? How do I get out? There we go. Let's see. This is a really good one. This shows off a different style and a lot of the nice lighting effects that are possible. It's just a little dungeon, and as you can see, there are. Oh, let's go through this collapsed cave here. Yeah, there's plenty of cool stylistic elements that you can make for your game. There's all sorts of embeds that are possible. These are some games that they've added because they turned this into a hangout space. And and you can work with transparency and have fun effects like, oh look, I'm in the water. It's
And
just
another
it's
thing I've
fun.
heard of that people using is uh, software for making dungeon maps for tabletop games to
Hmm.
build a layout for Gather or other similar spaces.
Yes. I don't know quite as much about those platforms, but if you know some good resources, Olivia, I bet those would be fantastic to add to that doc. I didn't even
I
think of that.
I think the one that I have heard of that people really liked was I think it's called Dungeon Draft.
Oh yeah, I think I remember someone posting about that in the server.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. That's how I found out about it. Someone said it was like the best 15 or $20 that they'd ever spent.
Hmm.
But it's not the only software out there that exists for making like fantasy maps.
Yeah, I really like the space here. If you could hear if I had my audio desktop audio connected, you'd be able to hear that now there's club music playing. They just embedded a YouTube video in the space, and it's just playing. Uh, and as you walk away from it, it gets softer. It'll stop playing eventually. And yeah, some nice lighting effects in this one. And this has a little video of the experience you have inside that car. Anyway, they also have objects that you can have spatial sound associated with, which is a really big deal for me. They've got a fountain and I think a fire, and I think now you can upload your own custom sounds, but I might be misremembering that. All right, these I think this is the space. Yeah, this is the space that has the really cool stuff that I want to show that applies very specifically to making games. It's a very big map. Oh, here we go. Ah, I've spoiled it. This is the coolest part. This is the part that makes everything that's so cool because when you go up to it and press X to interact, the constellation pops up. This is a reverse what's it called planetarium, reverse planetarium. This is my favorite part of this space, but there's some other very cool spaces. Let me get out. It's over here. Here we are. And yeah, in this map, there are NPCs all across the map. For one thing, that if you interact, it takes you to a Zoom call, so you can have a face-to-face experience just with that NPC, which I think is really cool.
Yes, I've
And
definitely seen people do that in various events and LARPs.
mhm,
Like the first time I ever used Gather for anything, it was for an event called the Friendship Garden Healing Summit, and there was a hub world on Gather where we could go around and there were private spaces where you could like have a conversation with just people in that space, and then you could go to a link to a Zoom call for the various sessions.
mhm.
And that's the thing that really made me think about the possibilities. And I've also played games in other platforms where there were people playing NPCs in a similar way, where if you go to a certain space within the platform, you could start a video call with that person. Even uh, one of the games that did this in one of the more interesting ways, although it wasn't on Gather, it used its own custom system. It's called Club Samsara. It's a LARP about the afterlife and like being reborn, where there are dedicated people playing NPCs, and like within the same window, you can move to different parts of the sort of club in the afterlife, and then talk over video calls with the NPCs in those spaces.
How fun! That sounds awesome.
Yeah, people are already making LARPs in these spaces or creating and like other sorts of immersive experiences. I've heard of people like especially in Gather. I've played a LARP in Gather before. There aren't as many people playing LARPs in Gather as there are in like Zoom or Discord yet.
Right. Fewer
And
moving parts.
I've played a LARP in Remo that was amazing. Like there are whiteboards in there where you can like add images. People they embedded a choose your own adventure game into it. They hid things underneath certain elements that you could look for. It was so much fun.
Sounds like fun.
And I know I've heard of people running LARPs in Spatial Chat and Wonder.me that I have not played a game in those yet, but I've heard of people using some of these other platforms for LARPs.
I'm going to pop into Topia real quick. I know we've only got about 5 minutes left. I think I need to widen my screen a little bit. So this is Topia, and it's got a very neat style. I think it's beautiful, and they started with spatial sound and music way before Gather did, and they even have animations like this fire over here. Uh, Not a whole lot of them, as far as I can tell, but um, they've got all of their objects are objects that you can like walk behind, typically, which I really like. The one thing that I don't necessarily care for about Topia is that you can't modify your character. Um, and that's something that means a lot to me. It's something that I always want to be able to do. Um, but it's slightly simpler to use on some fronts than Gather is. And if you don't care that much about modifying your it might be worthwhile to use as something like, for example, one of the Dystopia Rising LARPs chapters for one of their online events, they used Topia for um, a puzzle where people had to go around and collect plants and write down things about those plants and or items and take it back, and then they used that for some kind of game inside the Discord. And I loved it. So that is basically Topia. Uh, it's uh, it's beautiful, extremely popular with burner communities and people who really like this aesthetic, which honestly I really do. I've always thought it was beautiful. And pixel art doesn't necessarily appeal to everybody, so it's a solid option if you want to be able to be a little versatile with your aesthetics. Not that you can't in Gather, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
All
Gather
right.
definitely appeals especially to people with nostalgia for 90s video games and 80s
Oh, yeah.
video games.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, spatial chat is a fun one. One thing that I like about it is that it's got animations. It's really easy to zoom. I set some tables on fire. I think there's a theme going on that I didn't realize until right now. Anyway, it doesn't really have collisions like Gather does, which means your avatars, you know, there's no resistance, there's no walls. And if you're making a puzzle game, oh, that's one thing I didn't mention. If you're making specifically a puzzle or something where you need walls, where you need your players to not be able to cross certain walls, uh, Gather's the way to go. But anyway, this spatial has a very professional look. It's got plenty of options for stages, for breakout rooms. Um, it's a good option. I know there have Olivia, didn't you say that you noticed a lot of your LARPs using it for after game
Yes.
parties?
Yes, it tends to be more like a place for social hangouts or like meetups and stuff rather than actually playing a game in there. Although I have heard of people playing games in Spatial.
So the very last thing I want to talk about is kind of an honorable mention to proximity chat platforms because it's not exactly a proximity chat and it's not technically out yet. But you guys, if you like making games online, you have to hear about this one. It's called One More Multiverse, and it is cool. You can modify your character so heavily. It is made for games. Gather was originally made for conventions, for offices, for people who had more general needs in terms of collaboration in person. Uh, but but this one's different. This one was made specifically for gamers. And I don't have very long to explain why it is so cool, but I need you to believe me and check it out if you're interested. I am a little bit more tomorrow morning in my panel that is, let's see, time zones. What are they? It's a panel about online tools for running games, not specifically proximity chat platforms, but a lot of them, all of them, every single one that's ever been made. We'll talk about every single one inside a single hour, I'm sure. Anyway, uh, yeah. I hope this has been entertaining and exciting for you at least a little bit. I hope you have learned some things that excite you uh, about these platforms. And if you have any questions, um, I will definitely be around that Discord server that I to that document. I promise. Let me get my let me get my regular face back on.
Where else
There we
can we
go.
find you?
And let's finish out by where you can find us online.
Yeah.
You can find me online at oliviamontoya.com, at Paradox Revealed on Twitter, and metaparadox.itch.io for my game stuff.
I am GV Guide pretty much everywhere. Like TV Guide except with a G. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. It was fantastic to be here, and I hope to have lots and lots of conversations about often.